Welcome to the Under Construction Podcast with me, Martin Williams. Here we talk about how to build or rebuild your life one step at a time. Let's get to work. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Under Construction Podcast. My name is Martin Williams. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Excuse me. You may do so on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and SoundCloud. All the links to the podcast can be found at guidedexpressions.com/podcast with an S. Today, I wanted to talk to you about mental neutralization, neutralizing the mind. So I started reading, I started reading about soil acidity, and my degree is in biology, and I did take a course in botany. I was not very interested in it, much to the chagrin of my biology professor. She felt that I was not really motivated, and I wasn't. I didn't really care about plants at that point. But certainly, there's a lot of good information in there. I did remember some of it. But I started reading on this topic of soil acidity and how, when soil is not of the right pH, it can cause crops to not grow at the rate or at the yield that a farmer needs it to in order to have a good crop, in order to have a good season, rather. So, this is going to be kind of like a crash course, right? Acidity in rain or acidity from maybe different types of plants or pollution can cause the soil to become, more acidic, and crops and plants can't really grow at all because of minerals that are produced that make it harder for those plants to grow at the rate that they should, or at the rate that the farmer needs it to. So certain minerals like aluminum can be formed in an acidic environment, and that causes a bad crop. It causes a bad yield. And so what farmers have to do is that they have to neutralize the soil, basically raising the pH to a more neutral pH, which is around 7, right? So anything below 7 is considered acidic, and anything above 7, or, give or take a couple tenths of a point, is considered basic. Now, the soil can't be too basic either, right? But when you neutralize the soil, it allows the plant to really flourish, or the crop to really flourish at its highest potential. So I learned that, and it made a lot of sense because I've been studying this topic of neutral thinking, right? And anything that I study, I always try it in my life, and I always make sure that it works before I go out and tell other people about it or teach it or what have you. So this neutral thinking, it came from this mental coach, Trevor Moawad. Well, he didn't make it up, but, he more or less discovered it. And, he's written about it. So, and also taught it to his clients. And basically what it is it's not being overly negative, right? It's basically not allowing negative thinking to take root, okay? So if something bad happens, let's say you have a flat tire, right? Now, for some people, a flat tire is not a big deal, but for others, it's the worst thing in the world, especially if you're on the way somewhere, especially if you're trying to make a deadline, especially if you're late for work, right? A flat tire can really ruin your day, depending on where you are. But it really is all about how you think about it. If you think of a flat tire and say, "Oh God, I can't believe this tire's flat. I can't believe, that this car is crap, and I just got to get rid of this car." And it's like you allow your mind to go to a really dark place over something like a flat tire, right? And trust me, this is very easy to do, especially if you've never been taught to do otherwise. But if you think from a neutral place, instead of saying all of these bad things about your car, about the tire, about your life, you say, hey, this happens, right? This is not something that, I'm not the first person in the history of the world to have a flat tire, and I won't be the last. Okay? I have roadside assistance. I have coverage. And if you don't have coverage, you can always, call someone to come out and help you. So, it might be a one-time fee, right? But there are people available to help. You can always go to a tire shop or a service station and get the tire fixed, or get get a new tire, right? And all of these things are solvable problems. Is basically what I'm getting to, right? So you basically take the charge out of it. You take the sting out of this flat tire, and you're saying, okay, this is something that I can handle. Like, this is not an unhandleable problem, right? You basically neutralize the situation. You take emotion out of it. You take the frustration out of it. And you just deal with the facts of what is going on at that particular time. You have a flat tire. It needs to get fixed. You are more than likely able to afford to get it fixed, right? It's not something that you are thrilled about spending money on. No one really wants to spend money on a flat tire, but in most cases, most people can afford it. And if you can't, there are other ways to get this resolved, right? You can put a spare tire on. You may not know how to, but you might know someone who can. Or you may be able to stop a state trooper who can help you. There are many different ways that can, allow this to get fixed. But my point is, when you start thinking from that place, when you start thinking from a neutral thinking place, when you start neutralizing your mind and basically saying, nothing is as bad as I think it is, and nothing is as great as I think it is. Now, let me deal with the other side of it. So I dealt with the negative side. Let me think about the positive side. Okay? This is not to say that you can't enjoy life, right? So if good things are happening to you, that's a great thing, right? To enjoy life and enjoy these great things that are happening to you. But, when you're a neutral thinker, you're also thinking, okay, I don't want to let my guard down here. Because oftentimes when things are going really well, we tend to slack off, right? We tend to, not really dot the I's and cross the T's like we're usually doing. We tend to get a little lax in our practice, basically the things that helped us get to this place, right? And it can happen to anyone. The key is understanding that when things are bad, they're not as bad as they seem. And so you want to be hopeful when things are bad, right? When things are really like down in the dumps, you want to be hopeful, right? Because you understand, you live long enough, you know that bad times don't last always, right? You know that, even when it rains, even though it seems like it rains every day, it doesn't rain every day. In the rainiest places in the world, let's say, for instance, London, people that lived in London will tell you, oh, it rains all the time, but on average, it only rains about 150 days out of the year, which, still is a lot, but it's less than half the year. Okay? So it doesn't rain as much as people think it does. And it's the same way with life. Life isn't as bad as you think it is, right? In most cases, especially when you have the proper attitude. Now, I may have found you at a difficult time. I may have found you, you might have lost your apartment or lost your house. You might have lost your job, okay? You might have lost a loved one, especially in this time of COVID. You might have gotten sick. You might have gotten a bad diagnosis. And I'm certainly not making light of that, and I'm certainly not minimizing that. But I'm also saying that when things are really bad, they don't seem as bad as they aren't as bad as they seem, excuse me. So when things seem bad, remain hopeful, okay? Remain hopeful, okay? Raise the pH of your thinking, and instead of thinking negatively all the time, which is very easy to do, especially when things are not going well, remain hopeful. Say, hey, there's things that I can do, right? I'm not a victim here. I might have lost my job, but let me see if I can learn a skill that would help me make money. Let me see if I can learn how to design a website. Let me see if I can be a social media manager for someone. Excuse me. Let me see if I can cut someone's grass or paint someone's yard, paint someone's house, right? Let me see if I can, help someone carry stuff they don't want to the dumpster and make some money that way, right? It's always remaining hopeful. Hopeful means I can do something. I can always do something, right, to better the situation. When things were not so good for me, I always kept busy, always kept creating. And when I continued to create, I would feel better about whatever I was going through. And, as long as I created, as long as I continued to create, whether it was a blog or whether it was a website or whether it was audio, whatever it was, as long as I created, I was okay. When I stopped creating, then I started thinking about all the stuff that was going on in my life. And, that's when, my thoughts would kind of venture into that lower pH of thinking. And in that lower pH, it's very hard for things to grow. It's very hard for you to, create a relationship. It's very hard for you to create new opportunities because your thinking is not where it needs to be in order to create that, right? So in the same way, when things get really good, you want to remain humble, right? I'm grateful for what I have, but I'm remaining humble because I understand that I've got to keep doing the things that got me here, right? I'm making the most money I've ever made up to this point in my personal life, right? I'm the happiest I've ever been in a relationship up to now. My family life is stable, right? There are a lot of good things that are happening to me right now. I'm getting in shape physically, right? My mental health is the best it's been in a long time up to this point. Okay? So there's a lot of good things that are happening right now, but it's a reminder that I've got to stay humble and I've got to continue doing the things that got me here. Okay? Because when you get too far on the other end, right, and think that nothing can really touch you, that's when you find out that, yeah, something can touch you. And, life is just kind of like that, right? I'm not going to say that there's good days and bad days, but there are just situations, right? Situations happen to everybody. The Bible says that it rains on the just and the unjust. Life happens to everyone. COVID happened to everybody. It happened to rich people, poor people, right? People that didn't have as much money. COVID happened to white people, African-American people, Hispanics, Asians, Native Americans, East Indians, East Asians. Like, it happened to everybody. COVID happened to everyone. It didn't spare anyone, right? As far as, the circumstances around it. So, there's no such thing as life not happening to people. It will happen to you, but it's really how you think about it, and it's how you reset your mind to create the necessary environment for things to grow no matter what's happening on the outside, if that makes sense. Just like the soil has to be at a certain pH in order for the plant to grow, your mind, your mental environment has to be at a certain pH, has to be at a certain level. And for me, that's a neutral level where, if things are not good, I'm hopeful. If things are really good, I'm humble, right? And if I'm doing those things and it's fluid, right, I'm heading towards that place where things are going to grow the way that I want them to and have the type of life that I want to have. So thank you so much for listening to the Under Construction Podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, share. Please go to my website, guidedexpressions.com/products with an S, and you can find out all the cool stuff that I am doing and offering out to folks that need it and want it. So thanks again for listening, tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. Don't forget to subscribe to the Under Construction Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. For more information on Guided Expressions courses and products, go to guidedexpressions.com/products.